which included members primarily from socialist movements. So, for instance, all the kibbutzim, all the socialist kibbutzim were members of the Klalit. And then you had other organizations, and the country wasn't always in the same philosophy, trying to establish their presence in other places. So it wasn't necessarily philosophy as much as it was a requirement from the population, and B, also kind of internal battles to the huge thing in Israel, as well as external.
Yeah, I have two questions. As you said, actually the government is the one that makes the system sustainable, as long as they pay for the debts of the hospitals who are sick at the end of the year. Is this amount of money that they pay including the budget?
No, good question.
And if it is not included, how do they consider like a top of the? Who are the ones who benefits from that? Because actually all the hospitals, they might be some kind of sick at the end, and they might ask for help.
Well, first of all, they are sick. We are sick in the sense that we haven't received, for example, an increase of annual funding for quite a few years. Now, technologies have increased, so we're going to be in debt this year. There's literally, and again, I realize this is filmed, but Israeli audience won't, but we are going to be in debt this year.
Yeah.
What happens is basically that the Ministry of Health always goes to its big brother. Big brother is the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance is the important ministry here. The Ministry of Health just gets money, asks for money, and sometimes gets refused. And every year, it's like a surprise. Every year, it's like, oh, really? There's another death, there are another 200. And so there's kind of an annual ritual in which there's a surprise, there's a bit of shaming in the newspaper, specifically HMOs, CEOs of the big HMOs. There's somewhere between, either apologies or attacks. And then the Ministry of Health goes to the Ministry of Finance, which eventually settles things. And again, it's all out of the budget, so it's not even being considered. Makes very little sense.
And the second question is just more for you, as you were talking about the GCI and the accreditation program, and it makes a trouble for everyone because it's a lot of administration work. But what do you think about globalization? How do you put this accreditation in terms of globalization? Because those accreditation are made for creating a standard where if I go, for example, for a GCI hospital which is accredited, then I know for sure that the quality of the hospital accomplishes the standards that I'm looking for my treatment. So in terms of that and medical tourism, and just adding to this question is like, I know Israel is very well known abroad from bone marrow transplant, and you are very good at that, and this is, I think, the strongest market for the medical tourism system here. So if there is no accreditation, just like your own accreditation, how would you think that the world would look at you without having
it's a good question. I don't know, how does the world look at Denmark? I think reasonably okay, because they're providing a high quality. B, I think Professor Schuster used the term adapt and adopt. I think we need adapting on the way. I mean, I'm not saying we don't need accreditation, but we can't adopt without adapting. I think that's the important part. And C is my wife. She's a rheumatologist, and they just went through accreditation in their hospital in Tel Aviv. She will say, well, there's a bit of difference between the show you put on for accreditation and what actually happens. So does accreditation or any quality assurance really assure good quality? Not necessarily. And in a system in which you're underfunded, you're putting more and more resources into things looking very good, and this can come down to a manager or head of a ward telling a specific physician, why don't you take some time off next week? JCI is coming. You don't know the right answers, so just, this is a good time to get the flu. So these are literally things that happen. So I think it's important, and I've gone through JCI in another hospital before I moved, and I think there's a difference between how things look in the books and how medicine is actually practiced. And sometimes they even compete for resources and attention. So that's where I'd be concerned. But basically adapt before you adopt, and we don't do enough of that.
Yeah.
I also want to ask about what Isabella asked, like the shifting from the ownership of the hospitals. For me, it sounds very much like a form of privatization. And like I'm coming from a country where I feel it's like there's too much privatization in the health. Like I think a system should not only be going towards privatization. Like I really believe that the government or the public sector should also have saying or control, because if it's only privatization, it's going to very fast go just all about money. So isn't that a form, like just as a question, isn't that a form of privatization, what you suggest?
Well, I think it depends on how much the Ministry of Health is involved as a regulator in the HMOs. Because, taking one extreme, let's say the beverage model, in which the Ministry of Health owns everything to the best of my understanding, so that's kind of one extreme. But I think there's a midway in which the Ministry of Health really regulates the HMOs. And being that we're not talking about hundreds of insurance companies, but 4, if we limit them, I would assume that's possible.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that you're saying something correct, but I think it would be possible with such a limited number of HMOs here.
That's it. I have another question. The other thing you suggested was like this diagnosis-related groups.
Yeah.
And we have that, like
Right.
which is a new reform in Switzerland, and it comes from Germany. And also there, like we saw a lot of issues, especially for like if you're nurses or midwives, like there's a lot of, I mean there's for sure also benefits, but there's definitely things which is not great with DRGs. Like I think it's definitely one way to make something more efficient, but there's along this way, like with DRGs, there's also problems coming. It's not only fixing.
No, I agree. I have heard that people do what's called, I think it's disease mongering, or widening diagnoses in order to. So you do that basically to help patients get medications that they wouldn't for otherwise, or get rehabilitation services. I agree. What's happening today is because the most expensive thing are procedures. When you pay per specific service, what the physician's tendency is going to be is to go for the highest paying procedure. So it's not a way to totally get around, that form of rationing. But what I'm seeing is quite a bit of abuse of the pay per procedure, pay per service, because technology has become so expensive.
I think maybe with what it shifts there a little bit towards that, so that the physicians that people choose this group of diagnosis, because it's more lucrative,
right.
Yeah.
No, I agree. There's a price for that part as well. Thank you.
I would say that any kind of system can be gamed. In other words, you can make a game of it. You can corrupt it, if you will. In the States, I've worked in a hospital system. I'm going to tell 2 quick stories. One is a DRG story, and what they do is they hire a whole army of staff people to go through the medical records to change the diagnosis, to make it a more expensive diagnosis. And the staff will come to you as the attending physician, and they'll say, would you please sign this, saying that the diagnosis wasn't pneumonia, it was pneumonia with sepsis, or whatever it is, because we're going to make more money. So there's always gaming. The second thing...
And what would your reaction be to that? Like, if that happens so often, how do you react as a
You sign it,
physician?
you have to.
Oh, you don't ever say, like, no, that's not inappropriate.
No, because they'll show you. You see here, this is the test. Now, if it's really wrong, then you would correct them. Okay? You should say, no, you're misunderstanding. But generally, they found something that they can use. So it's not fraud. I mean, I wouldn't participate in fraud.
Of course, but I'm saying, like, how do you go about that, Like, do you then reassess everything that they've,
No, I mean, basically, they'll show you it's close enough, you sign it. That's what people do. But you've also increased the administrative costs because you've hired all these people to be looking at this, which is really annoying. I have one quick Joint Commission story. In the U.S., JC is Joint Commission, and then they created an international option, so that's JCI. And at one stage of my career, I was an employee and an administrator of in a hospital. And I was responsible for the outpatient clinic. And the outpatient clinic was for poor people. I had just taken over, and it wasn't particularly well run. I changed it quite dramatically over a period of a few years. And the Joint Commission came, and our clinic was part of the Joint Commission study. So they said to me, keep the site visitors out of the clinic. Do whatever you can. Don't let them go into the clinic, because they're gonna find things that are wrong. So I brought them into a conference room. As everybody knows, I'm pretty good at talking. At least I like to talk. We all know that. I had an hour. And so I talked to him for 50 minutes, okay? Until the senior site visitor, who was a little older, said, I have to go to the bathroom. And there was no time for them to go to the clinic. It was a huge success. Corrupt? Yes. But exact corrupt with a small c. Okay, but that's what I did, okay?
You do it,
Gaming the
Jeff,
system. Okay, you do it, Jeff. Okay, I want to make one point, and then we're going to talk about Greenland. Okay? But this is about the Israeli healthcare system, right? And hopefully, it's a point that we've made a bunch of times, but let's just sort of do it again. Okay. So, the Israeli healthcare system was created in the mid-20th century by a culture. The people who were here. The culture was of what political philosophy? So, socialist. Socialist philosophy, which says, who owns things? The government owns. Okay? We, the people, own it. And what's happened to the Israeli economy, Israeli society, and the Israeli health system from 1950, approximately, to 2017?
Move right.
It's moved to the right. And what has that done to the Israeli healthcare system? Made it more expensive? I think so. And it's privatizing. Right? So, we've heard from what is obviously a liberal, okay, who is saying it's too privatized. What would the people who are privatizing offer as a solution to the current problems with healthcare in Israel? What would they say?
Take the government out of it.
Yeah, move it further to the right. The problem is it isn't privatized enough. Let's take these hospitals and sell them to private corporations. They'll make a profit out of this, okay? They'll make it work more efficiently. Now, what do I think is going to happen to the cost of healthcare in Israel if you do that? It's going to go up. I think it's going to go up. What happens if you bring it back to the left? If you decrease the privatization, you start paying the public physicians more money, what's going to happen?
You increase tax.
Yeah,
Ah, so you're going to have to increase taxes. What's going to happen? Costs are going to go up. Well, guess what? The costs are going to go up no matter what you do. Because that's what's happening everywhere. We've seen that graph, right? Okay. So that's not to say you shouldn't try to make it better. I don't want to be discouraging about it. I'm just saying, you know, it's a challenge that's very difficult to deal with. Okay? Okay. Is that Davey?
I do have a question that's kind of actually very related to the presentation. We talked about how the government, like essentially hospitals are not utilizing their money to the, you know, not stretching it as far as it can go. They're being kind of unresponsible with it because the government just pays off their debt. I don't understand why the government wouldn't try and regulate that more.
Not the hospitals, the sick funds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sick funds. Hospitals are a bit easier to regulate in a sense because they're one location centralized. Sick funds are dispersed. It is much more challenging. I don't have a good answer to why they wouldn't. I do know that the Ministry of Health is not a highly effective place in Israel. And
I'll give you my answer. Okay. Why I would predict that the government just pays because it's bad politics. For the government in place doesn't want to embarrass itself that much. So the government is gonna blame the HMOs, but then they're gonna pay it because they don't want people continuing to talk about it. Because the longer you talk about it, the more people are gonna say, wait a minute, it's really the government's fault. And they want to get reelected. It's politics. Okay, let's take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, get up, stretch, go to whatever you need to do. We'll come back, we'll talk about Greenland.
Greenland.
And if anybody, after I'm done with Greenland, if anybody wants to stay and ask me questions before the final, I'll be here, we can talk. You don't have to, but if you want, okay?